Good morning. My name is Lindsay Sidonis, and as Northeastern Law's Director of Development and Alumni Relations, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to the 16th Annual Judith Owens Brown Forum for Women in the Law Conference. This conference is all about bringing people together to celebrate and nurture support for women throughout the legal profession. It has turned Northeastern Law into a gathering space for women who want to leverage the law to change the world. Because of programs like this conference, the Princeton Review recently ranked Northeastern Law as a top 10 law school with the greatest resources for women. And in our current first-year class, which has the highest LSAT and GPA medians in our school's history, women make up 70%. We are incredibly grateful to our amazing conference chairs, all the volunteers, our sponsors and donors for supporting our work. We could not do this without you. Please join me in giving a round of applause to my very talented colleagues, Julianne Griffin and Neil Marquis. They worked very hard to make sure you all have an amazing experience today. I also want to give a special thanks to Judy and Jim Brown. Their philanthropy cements women in the law as a permanent priority at our institution, now and into the future. And their generosity has also enabled us to expand on this work. We now have a Women in the Law practitioner in residence who spends time with our students, and we are taking women in the law on the road. Last spring, we were in New York City talking about career transitions. And this fall, on September 26th, we will partner with Mills College at Northeastern in Oakland for an event that will focus on the impact of women's entrepreneurship on communities of color. If you're on the West Coast, we hope you can join us. And now it is my pleasure to turn the program over to the recently promoted, our very own Women in the Law Barbie,
Lindsay, and thanks everybody. It's so good to be in community with you here today. It's wonderful to see new faces, and it's great to see some people that have come for year after year after year. One goal for this event today was to increase some of the networking time and also to be able to provide you with inspirational content. Recently attended an event with Gloria Steinem, and she fired me up. If she can stay fired up for 80 years, we need to. She's unbelievable. Also, we need more joy in our lives, and we intend to make this a very fast-paced day. And we've found that attention spans may waver a little bit post-COVID world. So our programming is very intentional. As Lindsay said, we're now in our 16th year, and it was a joint concept. I'd be remiss if I didn't nod my head to Professor Emerita Judy Brown and her husband, Jim. It was designed to inspire and support women attorneys. Judy is not here today, but she sends her love to all of you, and I want to send a special shout out to her and tell her how much we appreciate her and Jim. I have a fun update that was inspired by last year's conference. Newsel women are hard at work on advocacy for women's rights. Last year's theme was women's rights are human rights, which is very basic. Working with two Newsel grads, two others, Judge Delissa Ridgway, class of 79, and Dina Hurwitz, class of 96, were inspired by last year's conference and have drafted a policy resolution and report on the Equal Rights Amendment to be voted on by the ABA's House of Delegates in its annual meeting in August. It would put the ABA on record as recognizing the ERA as fully and properly ratified, and thus the 28th Amendment to the Constitution. So good things have come out of women in the law year after year. if I think about what we're doing and achieving here, it's storytelling. Whether you're selecting another book for your career, rewriting the middle chapters, or coming up with a new ending, this conference can be very helpful to you, and we hope you make the most of your time today. My very deep gratitude to my colleagues, Lindsay Sedonis and Julianne Griffin. They both deserve a big round of applause for this. My deepest gratitude to Amy Carlin, Umi Grigsby, and Jerry Haight, who have served as conference chairs this year, and it was not uncomplicated. More about each of them in a minute, and an enormous thank you to our speakers who are here today. Secretary Benson will be here a little bit later. Juliette Kayyem, we're just so grateful that you made time for us today. We couldn't make this happen without our sponsors and generous donors who have sustained this program. If you'd like to help us support women in law, visit the Brown Forum Fund today. It's on the back of your program, and we appreciate any support. Today, our sponsors have provided a lot of support, and we appreciate that. At this moment, I'd like to ask Gina Perini with Somos as the platinum sponsor, the big sponsor of the day, to stand up. Where's Gina? We really can't do it without Somos. Thank you to the Jim and Judy Brown Fund, who provide a lot of support for this. Thank you to our gold level sponsors. Eastern Bank, headed up with Kathy Henry, supporting us. Kathy, where are you? You're in the middle there. Wilson and Stores, Karen O'Malley. Where's Karen? Thanks, Karen. GTC Law Group, an avid and longtime supporter. Where are the GTC folks? Thank you. They're in the back. Grateful to you. Morgan Brown and Joy has been a longtime supporter. Is Andrea here? Thank you to our silver level sponsors, Bowditch. This year they brought 13 colleagues. They get the record again. It's unbelievable. Tracy here? Wave if you're here, Tracy. Morse and Lisa Warren, they do a lot for women in that firm. It's pretty incredible. So Lisa Warren is their managing partner. Thank you. Mala Rafiq with Rosenfeld and Rafiq. Thank you so much. We have an incredible team of advisors, and I have such affection for each and every one of you. They help us publicize, they suggest speakers, they are keeping me sane throughout the year. I really appreciate our advisory team. It's Judy Brown, Vanessa Candela, Amy Carlin. Stand up briefly when your name is called. Amy Carlin, Ellie Douglas, Kathy Henry, Sophia Lingos, Christina Miller, Karen O'Malley, Lily Palacios Baldwin, Gina Perini, Mala Rafiq, Cindy Reed, and Julianne Cocker. Thank you. Next, I'm just briefly going to introduce our conference chairs, and I'm going to ask them to come up one by one and say a word or two. Amy Carlin is first. She's class of 00. She's a director with Major Lindsay in Africa. And we have developed an incredibly useful shorthand over the years, and I'm grateful for Amy and for all of her listening. I really appreciate it. Amy does a lot in her free time, but she said she's primarily focused on raising these two amazing teenage girls who are kind to themselves and kind to others and know that their value resides within themselves. She also likes to do things that are scary, which I love, and keeps you engaged with life. Amy, can you come up and say a few words?
Who the mic? Well, welcome. Here we are. We made it. I think we should give ourselves a huge round of applause. We got here this morning, which is no small feat, I will say. I feel like pre-COVID, it was difficult, but I feel like post-pandemic, getting to, a conference at 8:30 in the morning that is a lot. That is a lot. And so I appreciate, and we all appreciate from the bottom of our hearts that you made it here today, because you are all what makes this conference so special and so amazing. So when I was thinking about what I was going to say in my 2 words, I was thinking about how much personal joy I feel around this conference and with the people that I see in this room. And I was actually wondering, because things have been so difficult and so hard, and there's been so much pain and suffering, I was wondering, would I feel it again? Could I feel it again? And the answer is yes. Yes, 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 I can. And I'm so grateful for that. And I would urge you all to take time today to be present, to open yourselves up. I know it's so hard these days to remain open and to open your heart. But to remain open today and to have conversations that you can have with all of us in this room, because they really, really can be transformative. We can be transformative, both inside and in this world. So thank you so much for being here today. And thank you to Jerry and Yumi. I have so enjoyed getting to know you over the past year. And I love you.
Amy, 1 second. Oh. And then you get a bouquet.
Oh, thank you, Juliette.
Have a great day, Amy. I know she will. Next up, I wanted to introduce Umi Grigsby. She's the Chief of Policy for the City of Chicago. Last year when she was here, she was in the interview stage, and it was all top secret, and we didn't know what the big next job was, but she's Chief of Policy for the City of Chicago. She spoke last year at the conference, and we all decided she had her own brand of magic, and we had to have her back. So, Umi, thank you for bringing your magic back today. She's also on the board of Planned Parenthood of Illinois, and she's doing... You may recall from last year, she wrote her own book, Empowered Health. Empowered Health. She's doing great things. Umi, will you come up and say a few words?
So I wanted to talk a little bit about community. As Miel just said, last year I was in the stages of interviewing. I had just worked on a campaign for someone who was not successful. And so I really did not know what I was going to do, but I knew I was coming here to talk about reproductive justice and learn. And I was really just here in the spirit of learning and being back at Northeastern, which is just such a special place. And at some point, I think I whispered to a couple of people that this was going on, but I didn't want to think about it. And the first people that I called when I found out that I got the job were Dean Paul and Miel, because they knew, and they were the people that knew that I was going through that. And so when I talk about community, I just talk about the people that I met last time that I've kept in touch with, that have followed me, like Kathy Henry and others who would call me and say, because they didn't know I was going through an interview process, and say, hey, have you thought about this job? Have you thought about this opportunity? So this conference for me isn't just about the fact that we're talking about very current things that feel very dire. Last year when we were talking about reproductive justice, it was very scary, right? The Dobbs decision to come down, and just thinking about what the future looked like. This year we're talking about voting rights and what could be a very contentious election. And even though it felt dire, you felt like you were building this community of people that you were going to take with you afterwards. And it's beyond just Northeastern. It's just about us being women in this sector where there aren't a lot of us, right? And so I want to echo what Amy said about being present, but I also want to talk about the community that you're building and the community that you're a part of just by being here. And that's it. And thank you so much, Jerry and Amy and Miel and Julianne. I think that this year has been hard for everyone because we're still figuring out how to live post-pandemic, and also still figuring out how to fight these big fights while also grappling with the fact that our lives have changed. in a very drastic way. And so I just want you to not only be present, but also be kind to yourself and to be kind to each other and listen to this amazing panel. I immediately came in here and was like, I want to be Facebook friends with everybody that's going to be speaking today. So, look out for an invitation. Thank you.
And last but not least is Jerry Haight, who's a partner at Mintz. Jerry's practice focuses on employment litigation, counseling, and compliance. She also chairs Mintz's Women's Initiative, so no surprise she's involved here. She does a lot for human rights. She does pro bono work for the firm. She's taught trademark law in the past at Newsall, and she is phenomenal. Will you come up, Jerry, and say a few words?
Thank you. So I'm like the thing standing between you and the speakers you came to see. So I appreciate your indulgence here. I just want to say, it has been a joy to help to put this conference together. Not only the people involved have been incredibly inspirational and thoughtful and just amazing in what they've done with their careers, but just this gathering is so special, I think, and it's something unique to Northeastern because Northeastern is such a unique place. I would say that so many of my own mentors have come from Northeastern, and I've met some new mentors last night and today, and so just totally thrilled about reconnecting with the school. So when Miel calls you next year about becoming a co-chair, take the opportunity. It's incredible. And Umi and Amy and Miel, as always, have just been great. I would just say, I was once an advertising lawyer. Hi, Patrice and Bia. And so I'm saying this as an advertising lawyer, that this is the most important conference ever. And, no false advertising there. I think that, the topics today are so profound, and the women we're going to hear from are such courageous voices on these topics and, helping to guide us through this election, which I have to say I've got a little bit of a pit in my stomach about. So I hope that everyone here, just takes some inspiration from them and is kind of fully dialed in on what's happening and gets involved in their own communities, to work on these issues. So go girls, let's do it.
Let's go, girls. Jerry, can you bring this to you, Nomi? Yeah, the key thing we're going to take away from today, one of the key things is vote, vote, vote. Have your sisters vote, your friends, your neighbors, your daughters, your sons. That's got to happen. Okay, next up, we have a really special treat for you to start your day and put you in the right frame of mind for the second year in a row. We're so fortunate to have Ella Marcus with us today. She's a student at the Boston Conservatory at Berklee. She has many accomplishments under her belt. She was on the cast album of the 2023 live TV production of Beauty and the Beast, starring her, H.E.R. Ella and her mother, Lauren Kinnan, have worked on a special song for this year's conference together, and we're going to hear I'm Just a Girl by Gwen Stefani. And Lauren, I just want to say, is one of my really close friends from high school way back in Oregon, so life is small, and love you guys.
Thank you for inviting me back. I'm so honored to be here. So I'm going to just say a couple words about this song because, frankly, I don't know that I really knew the lyrics particularly well before beginning to work on this. And I think that this way that I'm going to sing it for you, it kind of allows you to hear them a little bit differently from how you hear it in the typical way that Miss Stefani fabulously delivers it, of course. She wrote this, I think, when she was about 18, and it is about the difference she noticed in her strict parents raising her versus her brother. So there are some fun lyrics that you might notice about that. But I think that it holds all of that youthful angst about what it means to be a woman sometimes in this world. And I think you'll be interested to hear some of the lyrics in a new way. This is Just a Girl. Take this pink ribbon off my eyes. I'm exposed and it's no big surprise. Don't you think I know exactly where I stand? This whole world is forcing me to hold your hand. 'Cause I'm just a girl, little old me. Oh, don't let me out of your sight. 'Cause I'm just a girl, so pretty and petite. So don't let me have any rights. Oh, I've had it up to here. The moment that I step outside, so many reasons for me to run and hide. Can't do the little things I hold so dear. It's all those little things that I fear. I'm just a girl I'd rather not be, 'cause they won't let me drive late at night. Oh, I'm just a girl, guess I'm some kind of freak, 'cause they all sit and stare with their eyes. Oh, I'm just a girl, take a good look at me, just your typical prototype. Oh, I've had it up to here. Oh, 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 am I making myself clear? I'm just a girl. I'm just a girl in the world. That's all that you'll let me be. I'm just a girl living in captivity. Your rule of thumb makes me worrisome. Oh, I'm just a girl. What's my destiny? What I've succumbed to is making me numb. Oh, I'm just a girl. My apologies. What I've become is so burdensome. Oh, I'm just a girl. Lucky me. Twiddledum, there's no comparison. I've had it up to here. Oh, I'm just a girl in the world.
Graduating next week.
Unbelievable. Happy graduation. All the talent. So next up, to kick off our programming, we have a video component from Senator Elizabeth Warren. Brad, I'm going to ask you to show that when you can. We're grateful to Senator Warren for sending that along. Next up, we're going to have Amy Carlin introduce our morning keynote. We're still so thrilled she's here with us. Amy, and come on up, get us started.
Thanks, Miel. That was so beautiful, the singing. And that is a tough act to follow, Juliette, I admit. But we're confident you can pull it off. So we are so thrilled to have Juliette Kayyem as our keynote speaker this year. She is a national leader in homeland security and crisis management. She's currently the Robert and Renee Belfer Senior Lecturer and Faculty Chair of the Homeland Security and Global Health Projects at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. She served as President Obama's Assistant Secretary for Intergovernmental Affairs at the Department of Homeland Security and Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick's Homeland Security Advisor, a role that included overseeing the National Guard. She is a senior national security analyst for CNN. She's a contributing editor to The Atlantic, and you may have heard her on her weekly security segment on WGBH. She is so unique in that she manages to deliver insight and analysis on terrifying topics with a warmth and wit that really is inspiring. Her most recent book, The Devil Never Sleeps, Learning to Live in an Age of Disasters, was published in 2022, and it was described in a New Yorker profile as an engagingly urgent blueprint for rethinking our approach to disaster preparedness and response. I also learned from listening to her as a guest on Dahlia Lithwick, who was a guest last year, her podcast, Amicus, recently, that Juliette is the queen of naps, self-described. Queen of naps. So I was like, I need to know more about that. So let's give a warm welcome to Juliette Kayyem.
I feel like I could give a nap lesson at the end of this. Well, let me just say, I don't want to give a nap lesson. Stay up. I am so thrilled to be here. I've got my clock here. And I'm going to talk about a lot of different topics because I think that there is so much to engage in with the topic. But I first want to say thank you to Amy and Jerry and Yumi. So I just have to say one thing. I was like so proud that I wore colors today because I normally wear black and then I walk in. That's so unfair. I have some friends in the room. I don't know if Joanna Weiss made it in, if she's not here yet. And I know that Nina Dow is here and has been involved in an Arab American and founding an Arab American lawyers group, of which I'm one, an honorary member and a keynote. So thank you so much for being here. And I also want to thank Deborah and the team here and Miel, who's just been phenomenal. I give a lot of speeches and like, I want to be your friend. Like, it's like, normally I'm like, oh, don't, I'll talk to you later. But anyway, okay. So, I'm going to start with a story because I have a variety of roles in my life. And as Amy made clear in the bio, I like to say I have one career and many jobs. And that story begins, as we discussed, sort of like, during COVID. On January 4th, 2020, I read my first article about a strange virus that was in China. I am in homeland security and preparedness. That is my field, is sort of get people ready. I don't, I sort of don't worry about whether the harm's going to come. I sort of assume that it is. And I read the story, and things about it didn't seem quite right. China was claiming that no one was dead, and yet they had called in the World Health Organization. And by late, which is just a strange combination of things, and so someone was lying. And I see the sort of pandemic coming, and I have very lucky to have a variety of platforms to express myself and start to get a little bit nervous, and mostly because we're sort of in this delusional state. And many of you, I'm sure, remember, like in February, you're like, oh, it's so sad what's happening in Italy. I hope it doesn't come here. And you're like, it's a pandemic. It's coming. I have bad humor, so just bear with me. If I didn't, I would not. I don't know. I couldn't get out of bed, so I have and I was sort of expressing this concern not as a doctor, but as someone who just sort of prepared communities and mayors and governors and others to get ready. By early May, The Atlantic said to me, you seem to be getting worried. I'm not known to be sort of, on the edge. And will you write something for us about what Americans should be thinking about, not the specialized experts, not the, but it's like, and I wrote a piece, just like we're kind of deluding ourselves. I don't know anything about the science. I just know people are dying, and they're dying from a disease that seems to be respiratory. And and they titled it "America, You Have No Idea What's About to Happen," and it ran March 1st. My editor was a little bit worried. It was it was too scary. I said, that's the least of our problems. And so by March 2020, I too am inside. But because of my work, and I do a lot of private consulting, public consulting, and then of course teach and work in media, I'm really busy. And the kids are home. One came home from college. One is a junior, and at that time, and one was a ninth grader. So I have a daughter, but I have two sons. Did I just say but? And they have a shower. So I have to explain my house, because this will only make sense. My house is as many of you know, because we're in New England, was built in 1840, and that sounds so quaint. It's cranky and old. And I'm from California, so I'm like, this is not, I was like, how did I end up here? It's a great house, but it's in Cambridge. It's been a variety of different configurations, as most houses are that old. It was a 2-family house, a 3-family house. It was a dorm area, a dorm home for Radcliffe women. It was, and then it was a single-family home. So it had just different variety of lifespans. And when we moved in with the 3 kids, we were told that on the 3rd floor where my daughter was going to be, there's a bedroom, so you can sort of visualize this, and there's a closet. And the closet, so it's very narrow upstairs because it's a slanted 3rd floor. It has a slanted roof, so you can sort of visualize. And we were told that behind the closet wall is just crawl space. And behind the closet wall of this crawl space just happens to be in the configuration of the house above the boys' bathroom. Okay. 2020, the boys, decide not to tell me that the fan in their, I don't go in there. They tell me that they fail to tell me that the fan in their bathroom has broken, and it must have been for 3 weeks. They're just taking hot showers with no circulation. And one morning, the ceiling collapses and exposes not a crawl space, but something a little bit larger. I don't mean to suggest there's like a room in my house I didn't know about. It's just because of the slanted roofs over it. It was very narrow, but it was big enough for a bed, a narrow bed, and maybe a desk, or maybe a little desk. And it's slanted, so you're crawling. So we go up there and we're crawling, whatever, and we find one thing in it, and it's a picture, and it's an old picture from maybe 15 or 16, tinted in the way it is, a distinguished man, and leaning against a sofa, and on it says, "To Annie, illegible, mix something." At that stage, Twitter, and I was very active on Twitter, less so now, and remind me not to be because I'm in trouble right now on it. And I was like, I'm taking a break this weekend. And I put it on Twitter, and there's a lot of people very interested in history on Twitter. And of course, they realize where I live. I mean, they find where I live within 2 seconds. I was like, maybe that wasn't a good idea. And they start reviewing where it is. So I go to bed that night learning that this is Charles McHugh, a picture of Charles McHugh, who him and his wife, Annie McHugh, lived in my house from 1917 to 1919. And they had one son who died and a daughter who had lived there. Died when he was 6, and a daughter lived there. And then they moved out in 1919. That's the most we can get out of the biography when I go to bed that night. I, of course, dealing with hurricanes, terrorists, and cyber attacks, lock the door in the bathroom because I don't do ghosts. I'm completely freaked out. I'm like, what? Who are these people? And okay, now it gets a little harder. The next morning, I wake up to people reviewing who had, looked in the back, and the McHughes had a daughter named Letitia. She was 19, the same age as my daughter at the time of the pandemic. Letitia was the light of her father's eyes, went to the same high school, CRLS, was named differently as my kids, the public high school in Cambridge, as my kids went to, traveled with her father, and passed away in 1919 in our home in the room, which was an infirmary room, which is basically a room in which people went up to have babies. Hospitals weren't like they are now. She had gotten sick. Clearly, they didn't have TV then, so they sent pictures and books and whatever else. And she passed away there in the house. And we learned this from newspaper stories because the McHughes were very well known. And the McHughes moved out that year. And locked, closed out the room, never to be opened again until 2020 from the bottom. Upon further review, we learned that Tish McHugh died in the pandemic 100 years earlier, essentially to the day that ours started. 19 years old, so you can imagine, creepy, odd, a little freaky, but also interesting for me because we can begin to think that our experience is so unique and therefore unmanageable. And that story of which this cycle of this house, 99 years later, 101 years later, 1919 to 2020, of a family dealing with a pandemic and the karma of it in some way, and the fact that my work was dealing with the pandemic, and that I had a daughter I too was protecting, and that Annie McHugh, the mother, wasn't able to save hers, was a moment in which I realized, as the book says, the devil really never sleeps. That we are a society in which we can that we can learn from the disruptions and the crises. And I always tell that story because we are in a time that can seem unsure and unwieldy. And so my goal in a space that I'm in, where lots of bad things happen in disaster and crisis management, is to also try to provide agency to audiences, to feel like, the human species still has game. And I don't know any other to rely on. So I want to spend the rest of the speech sort of going through 5 different issues about what we're facing, to maybe help you find the connective tissue as lawyers, as women, as leaders, or would-be leaders, and what those mean for our democracy, for voting, for agency, and for storytelling. And that last piece is important. I've benefited from not insignificant platforms that let me gab all the time. CNN, The Atlantic, and NPR GBH. I'm very lucky because I'm and I don't mean it like, oh, fluke, but like, in other words, the world I live in is very scary. If I have one goal, it is to be a translator. It is to say, here are these things. Let me help you manage this in your mind, because this seems crazy, and it is. And to also try to name it. So I often call myself, both in my public sector role when I was a political appointee overseeing public agencies and first responder agencies, to now as a translator. And I think that comes from my legal education, and I am a lawyer, and practiced for 5 years in my career as a counterterrorism lawyer. So I know what I speak of. So part one, the state of play in 2024. So this is unique. I don't mean to suggest that we are coming, they're like, oh, it's just like every other election, or we've seen this. I love when people say, like, we've seen this before. There was a civil war. It's like, I don't like that analogy. That's not doing it for me. And I want to say, though, it's unique not just because of Trump. And so this is my field now. So we're going to go into wonky world right now. There are three phenomena that are going on simultaneously. That we have to recognize, and law and your commitment has something to do with it. So essentially how I describe 2024 is violence has become the extension of our democratic norms. It is either violence or the threat of it is out there. Name it, right? And it's not MAGA, it's not Trump supporters, it is violence. So those of you who do follow me know or read my work know that I focus on violence. I'm not here to change gross people's minds. Life is too short, right? I mean, in other words, I want to isolate it. I want to shame it. I want to put it in jail if it shows up on January 6th in Congress. But I don't need, honestly, you see the lawyers on TV. I don't need, as a counterterrorism and someone who thinks about incitement, if I don't need Trump in an orange suit to that's closure. That's not closure. If we think that's closure, that's not closure, right? This thing isn't going away. And we have to learn to isolate and minimize it. I do not talk about ending it. There's no ending it. Ideologies exist even after they fail. The goal is to isolate it, limit it, shame it, and arrest it if it is violence. So I focus on the violence part. I don't, as those of you who have read the book, I don't dream of a world of unicorns and rainbows because I don't have time for that, right? In other words. And so what are the three things that are unique now, that are related to Trump and to the incitement side of it, but are actually things that we have to factor in the way we think and talk about this country? The first is, and I'll be careful here, the demographics are changing. So this notion of the United States, so this notion of replacement theory, this racist, racist theory that is heralded, that used to be like you couldn't even say it, and now we talk about it as if it's totally normal. But it's the idea that ideology, that the table is limited, and therefore if African Americans or immigrants or women have a seat at the table, I don't, right? So it's the replacement thing, and think about what that means. That means essentially you would be justified in defending your seat at the table with violence. That's what it is. I mean, they give it a pretty word like replacement theory, blah, blah, blah. It's not a pretty word, but I mean, at the core of it is violence because you're justified in saving your seat. And that theory, though, I want you all to know is the basis of that theory is not, is true in terms of the demographics. Just a coincidence, but in 2016, the United States Census for the first time said that US-born, so I'm not even talking about immigration, US-born non-white babies outnumbered white babies. Now we can debate about Hispanic and definition stuff. That is true. So by 2042, we will be a majority non-white country. Everyone applaud it. Right. I mean, that is not hello, look at this room. It wasn't already. I mean, in other words, I know we've been in rooms where it is, but the idea that is and let's just say they know it. They know the demographics are not on their side, right? And we love it and we applaud it, but they know it. And we need to know that they know. It's not just some racist, the numbers are real and the disruptions to our communities, it's both about empowerment, but there are communities who are not going to see this as a good thing. Right? So we have to understand it. Obviously, I'm not defending it. But the numbers are going to show demographic shifts in our country that the politics are far behind. They'll catch up, no doubt. I mean, the numbers are just too overwhelming at this stage, right? But it's going to be 40 years, or it's going to be another 25 years. The second is, of course, the role of media. So like, what is happening here in terms of incitement? So you've got a theory that they're holding on to, of which the numbers are accurate. You've got media and social media, right? And that is in counterterrorism world, we used to talk about the lone wolf, right? There's no more lone wolves. There's no more, I hate that term now. He's like, oh, some guy's just sitting in his room, and then he goes shoots a bunch of African Americans in Albany. Like, that doesn't work that way. They have their KKK. They have their people. They're just not meeting them in the back of a church in Mississippi in 1960, right? Like, they have each other. They amplify each other. They push each other. They plan with each other. And so social media isn't just for bad ideas. It's actually for planning. And what Elizabeth Warren said is exactly right. That some have been better about getting this stuff off, but most are not, right? And then they live in the dark web and in back channels and whatever. So they are organizing in the same way that the KKK organizes. They're just calling it something different. And so dispute, I mean, in other words, one of the important things about how law is changing is that it recognizes social media as a network, right? So that's your conspiracy theory, right? As a network. That's how they are conspiring. We don't need to find them in a room together. I love, like, the January 6th report is like, then they met in a hotel parking lot. I was like, they're on WhatsApp together. Like why do I need to show them in the room? It's like Clue. It's like, the butler in the room with the candlestick. I was like, they are on, like, Facebook together planning this attack. The third is that they have a forgiveness in the nurturing of leadership, or the not forgiving of leadership. I'm not political about this, but this clearly starts with Trump. The nurturing of violence. Remember, I'm focused on violence. He can believe whatever he wants about other stuff. The nurturing of violence as the extension of what we are here for, right? In other words, the 2024 election is real. We need to call it out, and we need to prepare not only for 2024, but if he loses. That is, those of you who read my last piece in The Atlantic, that is the scenario I am worried about. I'm worried about if he wins, of course. But if he loses, right, where does this go? So we need to prepare for this. So that gets to the second part, which is, what do we need to do given this environment, right? So I think one of the reasons why I wrote The Devil Never Sleeps is not only is it because of disasters, but it can be applied to other fields, right? So the lessons of it, what I try to do in that book for crisis management is create, like, sort of connective tissue, sort of across, like, yes, Fukushima seems bad. Yes, that seems bad. Boeing seems bad. Like, actually, they all start to look kind of the same if you study them over time. I once was invited to a talk in. I was invited to Palm Beach in January, so I didn't ask many questions. But then when I got there, it was for divorce lawyers. And I said, like, why did you invite me? What is it? And they said, oh, because we meet people at their crisis point. And the lessons that you do about, trying to, stop cascading losses, trying to extend the runway so you don't get to a crisis, and how you prepare for it and prepare families for it, are a lot of good lessons. And I thought that's true. So here's the lessons, or hopefully that's true, of the book to prepare all of you for what's coming. The first is get your head around it. Right. I mean, in other words, I know you all know it in this room, but the way that we sort of don't say the word violence is just like, Trump was mad. Trump wasn't mad. He was literally saying, let's go kill the Secretary of State. Like, she's not here, I hope, but it was close. But he's not mad. What is happening is and what we need to do is call it out. Right? This is not normal. It's not normal behavior. It's not normal the way we speak, and we know how people are hearing it, right? So there's a theory of terrorism called stochastic terror, which is just basically the leader speaks in a way in which the listener hears it as sort of a way to think, as a license to act. And Trump can say, I was joking, why everyone takes me so seriously, and his supporters can say that too. Not true, right? Because we know that not only do we know how his listeners perceive it, think about how they perceived the tweet "will be wild" for January 6th, right? They knew exactly what wild meant. He's not having a party, right? I mean, this is what does wild mean? What does when you say about the governor of Michigan, what do you think happens when you say free Michigan? What does that mean, right? Well, some of his, not all, a small minority of his voters or of his supporters will turn to violence. The second is to not have a single point of failure. These are lessons from disaster management, how to think about it. And I think you're starting to see that now. Sort of multiple efforts to protect multiple pieces of our democracy, from voting and access and early voting to preparing communities that might be denied it, to getting, I'm seeing the mayor's chief of policy going, yeah, no single point of failure, right? Because the nice thing about a democracy is you tend not to have to rely on like a single thing, but it also includes backup plans should anything go wrong, right? Because you already know, this is the thing, like, why are we surprised? We already know that Chicago is going to be challenged. I know it. Hi. Yes, you're ready. Good. And so, right? Because why? Because there's a certain kind of voter, and I don't know if Illinois, but like, so thinking about ways in which we avoid the single point of failure, right? So and the single point of failure is the thing that goes from disruption to crisis, right? So think about. The third is, as I said, is in disaster management, I try to conceive of it as you're having a crash landing, right? So I wish for unicorns and rainbows, but I like live in the real world, and the crash landing. And so you only have two options. One is be ready, or try to extend the runway, right? In other words, try to give yourself time to prepare for it. So that is why, since January of essentially this year, you have seen the federal government, state and local governments, right, begin now to prepare for not only an election in which lots of things are going to be challenged, but for the violence that may impact public election workers and others, and then, of course, on the other side, right? This is the piece that I actually think we may be least prepared for. Biden wins, let's say, but not on November 5th, but like November 8th. Right, and that's a lot of time. Here's the thing, like if you just don't get angry about things, this is one thing, like say, I'm sort of done being angry. Like I can say with no emotion, Trump will not concede. And you can all be like, okay, whatever. Like basically, okay, we know he's not going to concede. What do you wish we had done, right? In other words, how are you going to call it? I think about the script that Biden needs. What are you going to say? What are you going to engage? What governors are on the phone call? How do you quiet the noise? And what are you doing in that period, right? I have called for the period between November 5th and January 20th that you designate DC as a national special security event, right? And everyone's like, oh my God, that's so scary. Well, I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, I don't need to be told that this could happen because I saw it happen on January 6th, right? So this is the learn from the past is another lesson from disaster management to prepare us that we can't be surprised by this, right? And we know also that the word violence, as compared to will you concede or was the election fair, is actually something that you can get unity on. Right? We hear these polls that says Americans are willing to take up arms to fight for their country. Well, that's like so nebulous. It's like, do you support violence if your candidate loses? It's a hard thing for people to answer yes, right? And that's the question as a media person I would ask all the time. I am done asking about like, oh, do you think it was a fair election? Everyone can weasel their way around. Oh, I heard about voters in Chicago doing the others, like, the mayor was hiding ballot boxes, right? Like, it's like, that's ridiculous. You can violence. And that's sort of the focus to think about what is out there now. Secretary of State will clearly talk about this, right? Given her situation. I can clearly talk about it. In the last 2 years, I have had outside of events in the last month, before last month, 4 security details at my home. I am well aware that it is scary out there. So I'm going to talk about what to do because of that. Okay, so how am I doing? Oh, I'm doing well. I'm on time. You can tell me if I'm doing well otherwise. I'm just going to praise myself now. Okay, so the third piece is how do you tell that story? Well, I obviously have strong opinions, but I want to talk to you honestly about my transformation in telling that story. As I said, I'm a narrator, I'm a translator, have that luxury in my career. It was sort of not a fluke, but it just became natural part of the way I wanted my career to unfold. I actually started my career as a wannabe journalist, or my post-college year as a wannabe journalist, and then decided I liked lawyers too, and I married one. Is how to explain what's happening and then how to give people agency has been hard over the years. I mean, for one I do think it's hard to talk about violence as a norm, right? I mean, we're lawyers. Most of us are lawyers. It's like we're the rule of law country. I mean, I'd like it to get back to that. I'd like to sort of end this idea, but it's hard. So early on, I was writing, and as I started to see what Trump was doing, remember, I came out of counterterrorism, so I know what incitement is. And a term that some of you may have eventually heard of, which is a horrible term, so I'm going to talk about communication. It's called stochastic terrorism, which I am, my small claim to fame is like dictionary.com said, this term came to fame because I mentioned it on CNN, which like the gap between me mentioning it on CNN and anyone understanding it was big. And because stochastic is a hard word, and I sort of ended up going to violence. But stochastic terrorism, I'm just explaining this to say sort of where there was a failure in communication what I said is sort of that idea of sort of coy, wink and nod, dog whistle incitement that Trump was promoting during his presidency, and it couldn't hold because it was like I was trying to pretend like I was the smartest person in the room. And I don't mean don't be the smartest person in the room, but I want to tell you how I think about translation. The first is simple is smart. Simple is smart. It is people, and I don't mean this like your peers or in a courtroom. It is just in law, even you're telling a story. We can say that's so freaking, on the footnotes, like focus on the footnotes or whatever. It's like, it's about justice. It's about freedom. It is about reproductive freedom. It is that story. It is not, it's a legal story or a legal solution, but the story is different, right? The story, and I think the narrators of this are being successful telling those stories, right? Of what is happening, whether Dobbs, cited this case incorrectly, whatever, Dobbs is easy, but, is less relevant to what's the story. And sometimes we have to tell it simply, right? There's a woman in Texas who wanted a baby and then couldn't have that baby. And the state punished her for that, right? That's a story we all get, right? So the second is to focus on the stakes and not the horse race. This is something you're going to see that media talks about amongst itself. And for me, when I get on air, I try not to do, the horse race, like this poll or that poll or whatever, because I would go crazy. It is more to talk about what the consequences would be. Think about the stakes for our democracy. And maybe that can help you sort of guide yourself through the next couple months where every poll is going to be proof that everything's okay or not, or proof that it's the end of our democracy, right? I mean, we're really not going to know until maybe even after November 5th. My personal feeling is I think the polling is not showing the Dobbs factor. I think anytime Dobbs is on the ballot, as I like to say, the independent white suburban woman who seem to fluctuate a lot. Like they seem to really be focused on Dobbs, which is not bad. And so focus on the stakes, like in law and training and in your communication, and not so much on the details, because these are big issues. And I think people can grasp big issues. But I love, like, as I was saying, I love like watching all my lawyer friends on CNN, and they're like in the intricacies of like some legal thing, and like, oh, this is really going to get Trump. And I was like, I've been hearing that for 5 years. Like it's not going to happen. It's not going to be like, oh, we found the case, and there's the email. I was watching last night, and like they're talking about like, oh, that transcript really shows it. I was like, there's been a lot of transcripts that really show it. Our goal is to isolate this, to name it, to minimize it. And so instead, as stochastic terrorism became too conceptually hard, I then began to talk about the effort against violence, violent extremism as a counterterrorism effort. And that first article appeared a week after January 6th. I was in response to January 6th. So we're trying to conceptualize this in a way that we're not conceptualizing it well, which is, this is terrorism. We need to treat it like a counterterrorism campaign. Isolate the leader, put in jail the soldiers, make recruitment and money harder, mock it, shame it, isolate it, do it now. And I had McConnell for like 3 days. And then he turned. I didn't have him personally, but it looked like that we could have gotten rid of this. Honestly, I really believe this in January 2020. I don't mean end of Republicans or even end of violence. Right? Whatever your politics are, you can't criticize me for not wanting violence in my democratic processes, right? And that's why I started to change about how I was narrating it. And I think people could conceptualize that, right? So thinking about this as a counterterrorism campaign, as lawyers could understand, was also a way to think about how am I telling this story. The third is, and then I'm going to finish up with what it's like to be a female storyteller, is there are techniques to think about as lawyers, I think, and people who want to be engaged in the world, and it's known as a truth sandwich now, which is like, stop with the outrage, right? Like, I mean, we know how the algorithms work, right? You get outraged at the algorithm, and the guy with 4 followers now has, or whatever you're doing, right, in terms of, and the truth sandwich is, and you'll see a lot of us trying to do this, which is, you basically say 2 + 2 = 4. Senator X said 2 + 2 = 5. I don't have any emotion. Actually, 2 + 2 = 4. There is no 40 courts have determined that there was no violation of election laws or any behavior that was unlawful in 2020. 2020, yes. President Trump, former President Trump says that he won the election. So that's your truth, right? There's your lie, and then truth again. 40 courts determined that, or in other words, you have to put the truth, you have to surround the truth, you have to surround the lie with the truth again and again and again. Amplifying the lie is like, well, okay, now I've just given it an audience. So thinking about ways that you communicate this as well as lawyers and others. Okay, I want to get to questions, but I just want to end the last 5 or 6 minutes on what it's like to be a female storyteller and translator and out in the world and trying to promote the rule of law and not violence. And then what do I want to be when I grow up? Okay, so let me tell you first about being a female storyteller. It sucks. I have a big nose, apparently, or bigger than normal nose, what was I going to say? What is it? My neck has been criticized. I mean, just stop looking, right? I mean, sometimes I want to text back. I was like, I am aware that I have, I'm Lebanese. I have like an Arab nose. Like, thanks for telling me. It's like, I mean, part of it is a caricature, or other physical attributes that I won't even get into. If other physical attributes that they go after your family, they go after you, they go after what you said, they're whatever. It is horrible. Join me. And we know who they are. I don't like the sisterhood of I'm leaving here. Like they won then. They won. And I don't like that at all. I mean, there's like, this place is full, we know some of the big thinkers and others. I didn't like that. I thought we had to still engage. There's ways that you can figure out how to protect yourself and otherwise. But if we disengage, not only did they win, but we are kind of denying the influence of social media. It's influential. CNN, honestly, cable's got 5 years at best, right? It's YouTube, it's social media, it's what my kids are watching, it's TikTok, it's everything. We've got to meet them where they are, right? And it's not fun at times. Like, the arena can be really brutal. And I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I just, part of it is, I just don't feel emotional about it, brace for it, like whatever, but just also kind of ignore it. Like, I still can't believe that some of the female translators, like the people that that you follow in this world, lawyers and others, like they'll reply to someone and say, can you believe he said this about me? And I'm like, why did you do that? Like, we know, as I said, eyes focused, we know what it looks like, right? We know what's out there. And I have felt it's very important to get more women engaged in this. Like, you don't have to be rude or whatever. You know what you want to say it simply, say it clearly, and engage. Because our democracy is being fought not just in the voting booth, but in the information space. And we need your voices. How have I done that? I think one way to think about it is, and this is so counter to a lot of the things that we learn online about women in leadership, is I actually do stick to my lane, right? Or I try to stick to my lane. I know that's not like the normal advice. I believe that I can't be authoritative on everything. And if I expend my capital in the space I'm in, disaster and crises, right? If I call everything that, even though I believe it, I will lose my lane. And I think about that a lot. So those of you who think about media, democracy, and all these things, like, in other words, your authoritative voice is actually limited. Trust me, I have lots of opinions about Dobbs. You can imagine what they are. You have never heard me say them publicly. I mean, this is semi-public. Never. What does someone need to hear about me? But I actually have lots of opinions about violence and democracy. And whenever I've strayed, I think it does, thinking about the platform that you want for the issue that you care about, right? Democracy and violence in my case, but hopefully also in your case. There is something about creating that authoritative voice and not getting distracted. Now, maybe this is different than what a lot of people learn about, social media, whatever. Let me just tell you, every time I've done, it's been a mistake, and I'm going to tell you a funny story. Because I thought that what Jeff Bezos' girlfriend wore to the White House the White House, for that, do you know what I mean? Every woman over 50 is like, like, what is that? Sorry. Anyway, I don't know her name. I don't particularly have a strong feeling. She was like, anyway, lots was going on there. But most importantly, she was showing a lot of skin. It was the Japanese prime minister. It was a White House state dinner, and it sort of felt like a screw you. And right, thank you. And this, you're now my fashion. You're right. Like, apparently, so I say this. Like, I don't know why I cared, because that's not my lane, right? So, but apparently, there is a whole group of women who, maybe they're in this room, who, like, I was body shaming. I wasn't body shaming, but who say that's women's empowerment dressing like that. Well, maybe it is, but not with the Prime Minister of Japan. Like I didn't know there was a debate here. So that's my way of saying, if you're not an expert in something, don't riff. Because apparently I walked into a huge feminist debate and I quickly receded. I was like, I don't want to, this is not my debate. Anyway, that's my most recent story. I'm not sticking to my lane, even though I believe what I said is true. So where are we now? So we're at an interesting time for us universities and colleges. And it is hard. I am a Lebanese American married to a Jewish man with raised the kids, all three of them Jewish. Is that the Lebanese or the Jewish? It's complicated. Let's just say, and so I teach at Harvard, and if you read the newspaper, we've had issues, and as if you have had issues. One of the things that I feel strongly about is that we have to help guide. Like it's easy to be unhelpful, right? And we need to guide our students, our peers through this process. I have particular viewpoints about the protests. I believe they represent the divisions within our country. I'm not that afraid of them, and there's no reason to have, and there's no reason why colleges and universities cannot protect all students while still letting a percentage of the students say they don't like what's going on in Gaza, right? That's not the purpose of the speech, but I am trying to guide a way in which, or think about a way in which we provide students outlets, give them off ramps, and we see them take off ramps, right? And then assert the consequences, right? Only then. And that's important. And maybe that's what the school did earlier or not. I don't know the details enough. But you got to provide a way in which we do have outlets for that discussion. Otherwise, you do get the radicalization that I worry about in all of our society. Okay, I have 15 minutes for Q&A, but I want to end on a personal story because we're all different. I love this because it's like young people. This is a women's event. I'm a lawyer. I haven't practiced for a very long time, but law and the way I think about things in terms of structures and preparation and disaster management, right? In terms of what law tries to do or seek remedies are very similar. I still view myself as a lawyer even though I'm not in a courtroom. So this is the personal part, I'm entering an interesting period. After I grade 84 finals this weekend, I should have just brought them here. Each of you would have had about one. I am entering an interesting stage in my life. My third child heads off to college, Columbia of all places. Oh my God! And I am also on sabbatical. Okay, do you like? Here's how I think about it. This is great. It's like my victory lap year. I've been working 30 years straight, got 3 kids out of the house. No one's dead, and great. My husband's theory of having known me for a long time, being very busy, is he's like, don't focus on the marriage. He's like, I don't want long talks about the marriage and time together. So I bought a house at the beach instead. Anyway, so I'm going to spend more time at the beach, where I'm still a surfer and a paddleboarder, and I'm a California girl at heart. But I want you to think about your careers. You get to, you get to write your biography. And you get to write your bio that's introduced by people. I made sure I looked at it as is it the right one? My biography, my professional career makes no sense, except I wrote it, right? In other words, I've had one career, many jobs, and I can explain it that way. No sense in the sense, it makes total sense, but it's a lot of different things. Some of you may choose a linear career. Some may choose careers that go in different places. Some, people are like, well, okay, this is mean. You love Massachusetts. I was like, I married a guy who got a teaching job here. That's why I'm here. Because I really love Venice, California. And so, you meet someone, things happen. If a kid is, I always say, you can never judge. The difference between having healthy kids and not healthy kids is really, for a lot of us who are parents, if your kids are going through something, you don't even think about work in the way that you did before. From 2001 to 2005, it looks like I've been working, nonstop for a long period, for 30 years. I had 3 kids, and I had the luxury of sort of having roles and things, but it wasn't full-time by any stretch of imagination. You had 3 babies under 5. And then I ratcheted it up, and now I ratchet across, and so, my mentor, I had 2 mentors who said the best thing to me, so I want to end with this, and they're not specific to women. They're a way to think about your career, and then those of us at later stages. The first was, when I was in law school, whatever you decide to do, I remember I was interested in litigation and going into government, and I kept saying, well, because I was at Harvard Law School, well, I should go to a firm, because that's where I get this and X and whatever. Should. And my mentor said, what do you want to do now? Not the should, right? Never take a job to get a job. What do you want to do now? Because now is really all you got, because you don't know what the next year is. And it's actually really helped me. at various times, right? What do I want to do now, right? Decisions I've made about my career, about not moving back to DC or staying, or being a commuter mom or whatever it is. What do I want to do now, right? And that calculation is going to balance all sorts of different things. But this idea that you can map out your life and your career in any way that you would want does not give you the benefit of now. I mean, honestly, and I think the pandemic just really brought that home true to me. As well, that I shed things that I didn't really enjoy. I shed, as all of you, we shed people who weren't bringing us joy, right? The second is to just think about your career. Another mentor, some of you know I obviously didn't win for governor many years ago. I stand here at a women's event as the only candidate that Emily's List endorsed and then unendorsed when another woman got in the race. I still love them, kind of. It was a different time. Women didn't run against each other. It's like there were 5 people in the race, and I was like the spoiler. Like I had 2% name recognition. But it's good that women are running against each other now. But when I was thinking about did I want to do it, and it's too complicated to explain sort of what was pushing and pulling me. One of my mentors who had just turned 80, I'm sitting with him and I'm like, and then this person might do this and that person. I'm like, and then the attorney general might run and whatever. And he just looks at me and goes, I just turned 80. And I know what my 80-year-old self would tell at that stage I was 44, my 44-year-old self. So I often think about that too. What would my 80-year-old self tell me? So the fears that you have. So I jumped. I lost, but I jumped. And I really don't regret it. And also, it got something out of my system because I think I had always thought about it. I'm never doing it again. And as my husband says, we're not divorced, we're not in debt, and you're not in jail. Success. So think about that. Think about your 80-year-old self too. So as I say, not only think about now, but jump. And you won't regret it as well. So as I enter a very interesting year for me, which my husband is worried about, but I think I'll do okay. I'm actually thinking about what does this stage of my life do? So we're always there at all times, no matter what we look like or what you think about the women that are your mentors. We're always... there's always those moments to think about what's next. And so I'm looking forward to my year. Come visit me in Rhode Island at a beach because I'll be there. Thank you so much. I'll take Q&A too.
With the outfit. So I'm with you and I'm over 50.
Yeah.
So I wrote down, simple is smart. I totally agree. I'm the general counsel of a company. I also run HR. And we're really trying to engage our Jewish colleagues, Muslim colleagues. And so it's a really complicated conversation. How do you have a simple, smart narrative as a leader in a position of power at a company with those kind of groups, with the current narrative that's going on TikTok?
Can I ask what kind of company it is? What...
It's Eastern Bank, so it's a financial services company.
Right, but it's also a community-based bank, so you've got lots of
It's a
different...
public company.
Yeah, different viewpoints and stuff.
A strong commitment to DEI and belonging and inclusion, so we're trying to do all of that.
Yeah.
And as a facilitator of that,
Good.
the simple and smart is a really powerful message, but I'm trying to translate that into a very tricky subject.
Yeah, exactly.
When I'm a white woman. But.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so... the levity still like you. Okay, so a couple things to think about. So and I think about this because of colleges and universities. You're not going to settle this issue, right? In other words, so once again, this is where the focus on violence becomes very clear. Because if you follow, I'm sort of in trouble with now I'm in trouble with the Jewish groups, which I don't mean to, but I think it's irresponsible to call all of the protesters pro-Hamas rallies. I don't like that. They're not pro-Hamas rallies, but there's elements in it. So of violence in them as there's elements of anti-Semitism in the movement. But if we are guided by the thought that the debates we're having are only because people are anti-Semitic, the reality is otherwise. And the reality is that many of these protests are led by Jewish students, right? So that I get that complexity. I also have 3 to college-age students who are engaged as well. So a couple things to think about. So the first is acknowledge you're not going to solve this problem, and acknowledge the thing everyone can agree on, that there are extremes of both movements that are not acceptable. It is not acceptable to, simply say all Palestinians are terrorists or all Arabs are terrorists, right? So you can create, this is what colleges and universities fail to do. I kept yelling, like, does everyone see what's going on? Graduation's coming. You can set the rules of engagement. The second is provide forums for this discussion that are in your sweet spot, right? So, in other words, so you're you can bring people who can educate. This is what colleges and universities fail to do. Like Harvard went quiet. We have some of the greatest thinkers on extremism, on religion, on history, whatever, totally went quiet. I was like, I think we're a university. I think the students really want information, right? We keep saying, oh, the protesters don't know anything. Well, maybe that might be true. I don't think it's true. Some of them don't, but I also think that we failed to help guide them. So thinking about ways in which you can engage community members, or also think about historical analogies to, I know Eastern Bank, and I know its commitment to diversity, sort of analogies out there, right? Third is, you don't have to say that much that often, right? I mean, the statements and whatever, people are adults and whatever, you just have to provide forums for people who may be feeling stress, who may want to be able to talk about it and elsewhere. I'm going to comment about this and not that. It's everyone stop, because the comments are never going to help. So what companies that I've seen do is they don't need to have a company position. They just need to have opportunities for their employees to either express themselves or whatever. So here's something that one company I know, because I advise a lot of companies, did, which is the Red Cross and the International Red Cross and the Crescent Red Cross are all involved with support in Israel and Gaza, right? So people, as I said, people want agency. So maybe some of the frustrations that we're hearing is people see lots of things going on and they don't like it and they don't know what to do about it. Well, that gives them agency, right? So people can do a blood drive for the Red Cross, or whatever, to give them agency, or a charity drive or whatever. So look for opportunities for people to assert their agency too, because I think some of the anger is also, it's really scary. It's scary for Israelis and Jews. It is scary for Arabs and Muslims and Palestinians and white women.
You probably answered some of this already, but for context, we hear a lot more these days, I think, about the conflict that erupts at the holiday dinner table when you have siblings raised by the same parents and you have polar opposite views about things. I would put that almost in the category of violence and call it out violence, right? Yeah. But where do you find opportunities to call it out where you can really influence change? Yeah. I have not been successful in doing that in my own personal situation. Yeah.
So, and it depends on are these disagreements, or is this about, violence, or so I'm assuming you're just mean vaccines. That's sort of your easy one, right? You're the Uncle Jim.
All are opposite views. Yeah. And closed minds, I would.
Yeah.
That's my mind is also.
Okay, so I'm being honest here. There are two things. One is part of sort of when I say, provide an outlet is to also accept those differences, because they're not going to get solved over Thanksgiving or Passover, right? Come on, let's And so I know this sounds crazy, but I've learned from others sort of thinking about it, because we have a blended family, topics that you will actually affirmatively talk about, not ones that you won't talk about, right? So and part of it is, ignoring the annoyance or whatever. So some of this is just I've been writing a lot about de-escalation and the responsibility of colleges and universities to de-escalate. That is our responsibility. And I don't care what you think about the students and what they believe in, right? This is leadership has a responsibility. All of you will know that. You don't get to be that person, right? In other words, and so de-escalation is our responsibility. It's how I, control myself. And so part of it is, yeah, we do have a responsibility to try to de-escalate in the family norm. In the family unit. I will tell you though, in terms of extremism, so if you're just talking about differences of opinion, I think I told you about extending the runway. Part of this is just, this is bad. Hopefully it will be less bad, right? And that's a measure of success. So you just want to buy time, and blowing up the family unit is probably not the best, not you, but solution. The other thing to sort of think about though, if you have family members, this is my specialty, if you have family members sort of going down the rabbit pit of whatever, right, of extremism or whatever, actually it is the social unit, not government, not shame, that actually can draw family members out of it. But it's not shaming or it's not argument. It is like seriously like, providing information. So as you could just look online, there's a lot of information about de-radicalization, because some of you probably do have family members that have gone through down that rabbit hole. I think I have time for one more. Oh, okay, yes, hi.
Hi, thank you so much. So as lawyers, I feel like we're taught to catastrophize.
Yeah.
Like whether it's a contract or Dobbs. That's your lane, and you're so grounded. Share with
I'm on
us.
so many drugs.
How do you balance, and how do you stay centered?
I have not balanced moments, and I check myself. So I one of the benefits. So first of all, does everyone know my husband is the Chief Judge of the First Circuit? So it helps to be married to a judge, because he's not on social media, right? And he's like literally like he's like a judge, So he's he's not like running around. So it's good to have a counter partner, and like he so doesn't like the public. The fact I just mentioned him here is like I can feel him getting mad at me. And he often says to me like, "Don't mention courts on air." I'm like, "Don't mention law on air." He's like, "It's a conflict." He has conflict issues. So okay. So what do I do? So this is going to be interesting for me because I structured with kids me time at 5 a.m. So no matter what, I wake up, and so part of that is I don't enter the day with everyone else. I've had a little bit of downtime. So I do think about how I structure my days. I'm learning to shed a little bit, so I'm not as harried. I'm learning to ask, like, "Oh, I can take an Uber. Thank you." Like, I know that's ridiculous, but I often don't ask. I'm like, "Oh God, I got to get a parking space." No, I don't have to get a parking space for a speech. And so we're starting to ask to make things easier. It helps to have kids who sort of focus it. But if I thought that there was anything, it is I have always consistently sort of demanded the morning time, and then demanded the extra. For me, the beach time is for me. It's in the water, and I think we give that up. For 10 years, I never had that, and I think I'm happier now having done that. And I'll end with. And that's what's going to be interesting with this coming year. It's like, oh, I don't have to wake up at 5. I'm still going to wake up at 5. It's going to be miserable. But anyway, thank you, and the drugs. And thank
Thank you. What a blast that was, Juliette. We really, really appreciate you.